I have just been moved so much today, every moment, because this really, I'm about to tell you what Women's Earth Alliance is, and this is it. This is it, and it's every one of you, and it is so exquisite, and I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to Amira, who has designed, she's designed so much in our organization, and one of the things that she's designed, and she'll tell you about a little bit more later, is the Weaving the Worlds programs. And those are these kinds of opportunities for us to gather, and it has just brought so much strength to our organization. It's like it's completed the circle. You know, we were working out here and in Bolivia and the Philippines, and so much of the strength of this organization is here, right around us, in our communities here. And Amira has really brought that up. She's planted those seeds, and they're sprouting all over in events like these, and it's just so beautiful. I'm so grateful for your vision and your leadership, and you're such a gift. So thank you, and thank you so much to my dear friend Samantha and my new dear friend Kelly. The two of you are such visionaries, and I am so grateful to you, and I speak on behalf of many, many women whose lives you are changing because of your huge vision and your generous spirits. So thank you so much. This is just such a gift. I'm going to just talk a little bit about Women's Earth Alliance and its story, because it's just such an exquisite story I can't help but share. And then I'm going to tell you really quickly about the Women in Water program, which is why we're here today. So Women's Earth Alliance is an organization, a global organization, and we work to unite women working on the front lines of environmental causes through the coordination of resources, technology, and training. And like Amira said, the kind of premise of our work is that when women thrive, communities thrive. So we're not just taking care of women, we are really taking care of our communities by creating this forum for women to gather. And, you know, for me, one of the major reasons why I felt really moved to do this work was because I was seeing women on the forefront of a lot of the environmental challenges, right there on the front lines. And I was also seeing women at the helm of the solutions. And that really, really woke me up. My story is that I was on a journey. I was an environmental advocate working around the world, from Africa to the Russian Far East to Alaska to China. I had the gift to be able to do this work and work with, I should step up here so I can see all eyes, and work with incredible environmental activists working on the front lines of environmental and social justice in communities around the world. And these were some of the most courageous, resolute people I have ever met. And they weren't PhDs necessarily, or lawyers, or they were everyday people who were standing for a better community. They were mothers, they were health workers, they were journalists. They picked up a camera because they saw something going on that wasn't right, and they became a journalist. Very moving to me to see people take the issues that were happening in their own communities, you know, into their own hands. And so what I wasn't expecting to see, though, was that women, time and time again, even though that wasn't my focus, were at the forefront. You know, and they weren't doing this work as their careers. They were doing this work because it was their lives. It was their roles. It was their responsibilities. I have a few little stories to tell about my journey that were moments for me that really woke me up to this inextricable link between women and the environment. One of my earlier stories that was towards the beginning of when this all started to piece together for me was when I was working in the U.S. Southwest, the U.S. Midwest. And I was working with an environmental law firm in a small community where there was the largest lead smelter in the country. The streets were black, so you could see it on the white walls. The children's blood lead levels were through the roof. There was lead in the schools. There was lead in the water, in the food. And it was the mothers that were coming together and galvanizing their community and calling forth the press and standing up to the EPA. And it was the mothers that shifted what happened there in that community. And I'll never forget those mothers. I worked for CARE International, and I had the opportunity to work in an area in rural Kenya. And I remember I met farmers, many farmers, and they were all women. Women make up the largest percentage of food producers in the world. And these farmers, these women, were really struggling with issues of land tenure, of pesticides poisoning their crops, of soil degradation. And I watched the way they struggled to make sure that there was food available for their families and for their communities, and that it was on their shoulders. I remember these incredible Inuit women that I met in the Arctic, in Alaska. And these women were living in an area that was literally melting beneath their feet. They were on the front lines of climate change. Out of the books that we read and the scary, news previews in the movies, these women were living and breathing climate change. Their land was melting and they needed to relocate and figure out how to get a new food source for their communities. They were subsistence-based cultures. And I felt the weight of that work and that challenge on those women. And then I will never forget the many hours that I have walked with my African sisters when I lived in East Africa to get water. And the pressure and the responsibility was literally on those women's shoulders and their heads and their backs as we would walk together for hours and hours to get water and then have to go back. And I will never forget the way, for me, it was a long walk and I was tired. But for them, this was a missed opportunity for them to get an education. Each hour was spent was a missed opportunity. Each hour was spent was a missed opportunity for them to create a livelihood. Their future was being stolen because this resource wasn't available to them and they didn't have the tools and the resources to shift things. And so what was so moving to me was that these women weren't going anywhere. They were deeply rooted in their communities and they were figuring things out. I remember I was at this press conference and this woman stood up and she said to the EPA, she took the microphone and she said to the EPA, "I am not an environmentalist. I am a mother. And I have a heart, I have a conscience, I have an investment in my children's future, and I have a community behind me." The room was silent. And it was those kinds of articulating of the issues that made me realize that these women weren't bound by these artificial lines between environmentalism and health and human rights and spirituality and economics. To these women that I was meeting and who were inspiring me and moving me into action, these women really saw this holistically. And that to me said something. That to me said this is the kind of direction we need to go. And at the same time, as inspiring as these women were to me, I also saw them really express very clearly a lack of resources that was available to them as they were doing the work that they had to do. Lack of information, lack of training and technology, lack of an opportunity to connect with other women who might have gone through similar challenges and designed solutions. And so in looking and kind of peeking into all of these lives of these women that I had stumbled upon, I wasn't even looking for this tapestry of women's stories, I really started to see that a groundswell of energy would be available to these women if they had a power base, if they had a forum to share ideas, share resources, share best practices, build alliances to amplify their local efforts and become global advocates. And so I looked around to see, what was out there to support these women, and I didn't see anything, and there wasn't anything there. And I couldn't get out of my mind this vision of this forum, of this coming together. And so I left my job, I took the leap, and I called forth my advisors and my mentors and my colleagues, and I said, will you help me build this? It was like that cheesy Kevin Costner movie where he says, if you build it, they will come. I had that mantra in my head, but it was true. And that's what we did. So that's really how Women's Earth Alliance started. We built a blueprint, a small group of international women, and we called it Women's Global Green Action Network at the time. And as you can tell, we had to change that name because it's way too long. And even though, it translated well in different languages, that didn't work out. But the point is that we created the vision, and then we invited women from all over the world who were working on the front lines of environmental challenges to come together and meet and convene and design this organization.